My parents moved into my house, and when my older sister also decided to move in, she demanded the master bedroom and half of my personal space in the house. I kicked everyone out. So now, it's just me, 26 years old, living with my parents in a house I fully pay for. Sounds simple, right? But it's much more complicated than that. Let me start from the beginning. Last year, I bought a house in the city. I cover the entire mortgage, pay all the bills, buy the groceries, everything. My parents, both retired teachers, don't pay a single penny. It wasn't a situation where I had to move back home because I couldn't afford rent. Actually, I make good money as a software engineer, and I wanted to be closer to job opportunities in the city. I also thought it'd be nice to help them after all the years of support they'd given me. It's a cozy, 3-bedroom house, not fancy, but with a spacious living room and a backyard. Since I pay for everything, I claimed the master bedroom, which has a walk-in closet and its own bathroom. That's ideal because I hate sharing a bathroom. The second bedroom is my home office. I work from home about 80% of the time, so I set it up with dual monitors, a comfortable chair, and everything I need. The third bedroom is for guests when family comes to visit. At first, everything was fine. My parents were happy to be in the city, doing their own thing while I worked and managed the house. I didn't mind covering the expenses. It felt good to support them after all they'd done for me. But then things changed. One morning at breakfast, my mom dropped a casual bombshell. My older sister Jessica and her husband Eric were thinking about moving to the city. Eric's wife is pregnant, and apparently, they'd been struggling and could really use some help. Initially, I didn't think much of it. Jessica and Eric are always bouncing from one bad situation to another, but I assumed they'd rent a small place nearby if they moved. That's when things took an unexpected turn. A few days later, my mom sat me down with her sweetest innocent tone and told me they'd invited Jessica and Eric to stay with us temporarily until they got back on their feet. They didn't ask if I was okay with this. No, I was only told after they'd extended the invitation. I was still processing the news when Jessica and Eric showed up with suitcases, clearly planning on staying long-term. Here's the thing. Jessica and Eric moved in, and from the start, it was clear they weren't planning to leave anytime soon. I was already stressed about the extra expenses. Now I'd be footing the bill for 2 more people without anyone even asking how I felt about it. I love my sister, but Jessica isn't exactly responsible. She always lands in messy situations, and everyone ends up bailing her out. Eric is nice enough, but he has this entitled attitude that drives me crazy. Like because his wife is pregnant, the world should revolve around them. The tension started building immediately. A few days after they moved in, Eric began making little comments, the kind that sound harmless but are actually annoying. This house is huge, it must be tough for you to clean it alone. Or, we're going to need a lot of space for the baby stuff when he arrives. At first I brushed it off, but then one night, things escalated. Jessica and Eric pulled me aside, saying they wanted to talk. I thought maybe they were going to apologize for the extra burden they were putting on me or maybe offer to help with expenses. But no. Eric calmly said, "We've been thinking, it would make more sense if we took the master bedroom." I blinked, thinking I misheard, but Jessica chimed in. "Yeah, the baby will need a lot of stuff, and your room has the closet and private bathroom. Let me remind you, I pay the mortgage, I pay for everything, and here they were suggesting that I give up my own room for them and their future baby." I managed to stay calm and asked, "Why not take the guest room? It's big enough." Eric looked at me like I'd suggested something absurd. "That room doesn't have a walk-in closet," he said. "The baby will need space." That was my breaking point. I told them, "I'm not giving up my room. You can have the guest room, or you can find somewhere else to stay." Jessica looked a bit taken aback, like she couldn't believe I wasn't giving in, but Eric was openly offended. At that moment, I knew this wasn't going to end well. Things only got worse in the days that followed. I noticed Jessica and Eric were getting very comfortable. Their stuff was everywhere, shoes tossed by the sofa, baby magazines scattered across the dining table, and even Eric started talking about where he planned to put the crib, as if he'd already decided they'd be taking the master bedroom. One day, I had to go to the office for a meeting. When I came home, my blood ran cold. My personal things, clothes, computer monitor, everything, were piled in the hallway. I stormed into the master bedroom, and there was Jessica, casually packing the rest of my things like it was no big deal. "What the hell are you doing?" I practically yelled. She didn't even flinch. "Mom said we could start moving in here," she said. "The baby's coming soon, and we need the space." I was livid. "I told you you're not taking my room." Jessica crossed her arms. "The guest room is too small." I didn't care. "I don't care. You're not taking my room. You can stay in the guest room or find somewhere else to live." Jessica was furious, but I didn't care. I stormed out, grabbed my phone, and I called my mom, even though she wasn't home at the time. "Mom, did you tell Jessica and Eric they could move into my room?" There was a pause. Finally, she admitted, "Well, I thought it would be the best solution. They need the space, and you already have the office. It's not like you're using the main bedroom much." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Seriously? I pay the mortgage, I pay the bills, and you think it's fine for them to take my room?" She tried to calm me down, saying it wasn't a big deal, but I was done listening. "I'm not giving them my room. If they don't move their stuff, they'll have to find somewhere else to stay." After that call with my mom, something inside me broke. It wasn't just anger, it was a deep sense of betrayal. I had worked my whole life for what I have. The house is mine, the bills are mine. And now everyone was acting like I had no say or control over my own life. It was as if all my sacrifices had been taken for granted, as if they were an obligation, not a choice. I took a deep breath and went back to the main bedroom, where Jessica was still rearranging my things, stacking some of my shirts like it was no big deal. "Get your stuff out of here right now," I said, trying to keep calm, though the rage was boiling inside me. Jessica looked at me as if I were overreacting. Eric, who had just come in, shot me a condescending smile. "You don't have to get so worked up, man. We're family," he said, as if that justified the absurd invasion of my space. "Family or not, this house is mine, and if you don't get your things out right now, I'll throw it all out in the yard." Jessica looked at me, outraged, as if I were the villain in this story. Eric tried to argue, but I had made up my mind. I walked past them, grabbed their suitcases and boxes, and started dragging them into the hallway. Jessica protested, but I didn't hear a word. When I finished emptying the room, I turned to them and firmly said, "You have two options: stay in the guest room and respect my rules, or leave my house today." They looked at each other, clearly shocked that I was being so direct. Eric muttered something about a lack of empathy, but I ignored him. Just then, my mom got home, and when she saw the chaos in the hallway, she rushed over to us, alarmed. "What's going on here?" she asked, looking first at me, then at Jessica, who was already forcing out some tears. "Ask them, Mom. They thought they could just take over my room." My mom sighed, like I was the irrational one here. "It doesn't have to be this way, honey. Jessica and Eric are going through a hard time. It wouldn't hurt you to make a little compromise." "Compromise?" I repeated incredulously. "Compromise the room I pay for with my job, the house I maintain alone, my privacy, and my comfort? No, Mom. I'm not going to compromise." She tried to argue, but I interrupted her. "I let them stay out of consideration, but this has gone too far. If they can't respect my boundaries, all of you will have to leave. I am under no obligation to support anyone but myself." Jessica, who had been silent until then, finally burst out. "You're unbelievable. After everything we've done for you, and now that we need help, you turn your back on us?" I let out a bitter laugh. "Done for me? What exactly have you done, Jessica? Who's been pulling you out of trouble? Who's been there every time you messed up?" "Me. And now you think you have the right to come here and take what's mine?" Jessica stayed quiet, biting her lip. Eric folded his arms defiantly. Well, if that's how you want it, we'll stay in the guest room, he said, as if he were doing me a favor. My mom tried to mediate again, but I was clear. If you try something like this again, all of you are out. The following days were a silent hell. Jessica and Eric stopped talking to me, and my mom spent her time trying to get us to reconcile, suggesting family dinners I refused without a second thought. My dad, as always, kept his distance, watching in silence. I started avoiding the common areas of the house to avoid crossing paths with them. I locked my room and office every time I left, fearing they might try something in my absence. One morning, I got a notification from the bank. Someone had tried to access my account. They hadn't succeeded, but it was enough to set off all my alarms. I went straight to the kitchen, where Jessica and Eric were having breakfast, and threw my phone onto the table. You tried to get into my bank account? I asked, furious. Jessica pretended not to understand, but the nervous look on Eric's face gave him away. I knew it was him. Do you really think you can invade my life like this and get away with it? I said, staring him down. Eric raised his hands in a defensive gesture. We were just seeing if we could adjust some things, since we're sharing expenses. Sharing expenses? The audacity was unreal. I couldn't take it anymore. Pack your things and get out of my house now. My mother jumped into the conversation, pleading for me to calm down, and saying that kicking them out would be unfair. But I was no longer willing to negotiate. They had 1 hour to pack and leave. I called the police. Jessica started crying for real this time, but I didn't care. I was exhausted. I called a moving company and requested they come for their belongings. In less than an hour, the truck was at the door. They left furious, with my mother lamenting, while my father followed them silently, as always. When the door finally closed behind them, I sank onto the sofa, exhaling deeply. For the first time in weeks, I could breathe easy. The days were calm, though the silence in the house felt strange at first. Soon, I understood that I had made the best decision for myself. It didn't matter that they were family. No one had the right to disrespect me or take what was mine. From that moment on, I vowed never to let anyone cross the boundaries I had set. After they left, peace returned to my home, but the resentment lingered beneath the surface. I couldn't believe their audacity in trying to take over my space, nor how my mother had sided with them. The silent nights were a relief, but the anger and the sense of betrayal accompanied me every day. I knew I couldn't let what they did slide. It wasn't enough to have thrown them out of my house. I needed revenge, cold and calculated. I wouldn't make scenes or seek confrontations. My plan would be relentless and definitive. First, I cut off all financial support I had been giving to my parents. No more money for trips, no more gifts, no extra help of any kind. Then, I closed the joint accounts we had at the bank, transferring the little that was left to my personal account, leaving clear instructions that there would be no more transactions in their names. After that, I sent a clear and direct message to Jessica and Eric. You have been a burden in my life for far too long. I hope you learn what it's like to live depending on others. Don't ever ask me for anything again. I blocked their numbers immediately. I wouldn't give them the chance to respond or justify themselves. That was just the first step. I knew Jessica was obsessed with maintaining the appearance of a perfect family on social media. She posted pictures showcasing an idyllic life, pretending that her pregnancy was a dream come true and that Eric was the ideal husband. But I knew the truth. Eric was unemployed, and their relationship was fraught with conflict. I knew exactly how to use this against them. I collected all the information I had overheard in their conversations. Lies about bank loans, arguments over money, and the debts Eric had accumulated trying to portray a lifestyle he couldn't afford. Armed with that information, I created an anonymous profile on a local social network and began to leak their secrets slowly. I didn't reveal anything explicit but left enough hints for rumors to start circulating. Soon, their friends and acquaintances began questioning the reality behind the image they projected. Uncomfortable comments flooded Jessica's posts, and Eric had to shut down their accounts. The fights between them, which were already frequent, became explosive. Through family members, I learned that Jessica was furious with Eric for failing to maintain the image that mattered so much to her. Moreover, Eric's mother discovered the debts he had hidden, causing a definitive rift between them. Meanwhile, my mother continued trying to mend things with me, sending long messages pleading for reconciliation, but I ignored them. For me, there was no turning back. I wouldn't allow anyone else to use my life as if it were an extension of theirs. I knew my parents were planning to sell the family home to settle their debts and secure a comfortable retirement. That would be my final blow. I convinced a real estate agent friend to make a lowball offer on the house, just below market value, but attractive enough. My parents, desperate to sell, accepted without a second thought. When the sale was nearly finalized and they had turned down other offers, my friend pulled out at the last minute, leaving them with no buyers. Panic took hold of them. Their debts were mounting, and now they were stuck with a house they couldn't sell. At that point, chaos had engulfed my family. Jessica and Eric were on the brink of divorce, my parents were drowning in financial problems, and I was finally free from their abuses. One day, my mother showed up at my door, desperate, begging for help. I looked her in the eyes, stern but firm. "I warned you. Don't ever cross my boundaries again. Now face the consequences of your decisions." She tried to explain herself through tears, but I wasn't swayed. I closed the door in her face and relished the silence of my home. In time, I learned that Jessica moved back in with my parents after her divorce, while Eric vanished, buried in his debts. My parents never managed to sell the house and eventually lost it to the bank. Homeless and broke, they ended up in a small apartment on the outskirts of town. No one was looking for them anymore. After years of emotional abuse and manipulation, they were reaping what they had sown. I moved on, focusing on my career, investing in myself, and eventually relocating to another city surrounded by people who truly cared for me. My revenge was complete. They learned the hard way that you can't treat someone like an option and then plead to be a priority. In the end, they were left with nothing, while I was finally free to live the life I always wanted, without looking back.